Zach Schonbrun is our guest. The Performance Cortex, How Neuroscience is Redefining Athletic Genius is his book. We're talking about cognitive analytics, now getting deep in there. But this is understanding decision-making and how we as humans do that. Where is that happening now with baseball?
Yeah, so there's one company that I followed and wrote about in the book that has been introducing neuroimaging into baseball. And this piece of equipment is designed to analyze and quantify when a baseball hitter is making a decision to swing or not swing at a pitch. And so they use a piece of neuroimaging equipment called EEG. They're the first company to introduce that piece of equipment into baseball. And so teams have been very interested in obviously knowing when that decision is being made and how different players might differentiate themselves in terms of decision making, and also perhaps as a scouting and screening tool.
Right, so are some athletes better at that? Like we tend to think, well, he's faster, fast twitch, wrists, all this. You're saying there is a differentiation in somewhere deep within as to how many receptors are firing or something like that?
Yeah. I mean, what's really interesting about this is, yes, there are ways to identify a player based on what his EEG results are telling the team in terms of his decision-making. And players on a different, even on the same team and a same lineup, can have different results in terms of their decision-making and when they are deciding to swing or not swing at a pitch. And I think what EEG and neuroscience is really being able to bring to teams is, obviously, we've always had an idea when a hitter decides to swing at a pitch because he moves, he swings, right? But what the EEG can tell a team is when the same decision is made not to swing at a pitch. It still registers as neural activation, and even though there's no corresponding movement. And so that's where I think, EEG and neuroscience is starting to being able to bring that access to Major League Baseball teams.
And maybe you can, like, I don't know, spot the next Joey Votto, a guy who has just superior ability in that one thing, almost like you described Jackie Stewart, right? The Formula One racer, great auto racer, who had this just crazy ability to feel everything in his car and the road at a certain time. Right. So there are things that are happening. There's Jackie Stewart, kids. So there are things like that in the brain that are happening at an incredible depth, right? Try to dig into that a little bit.
Well, I mean, what's really happening is that experts in anything, but especially in athletes, they're seeing the game differently than you or I. If I was to watch a baseball game with Bryce Harper, he would be picking up on things that I certainly could not do at my own level. Even though I've been watching the game for a long time, he would see things that are different. And so there was a great study about basketball players in Europe, and they tested these players about whether they could tell if a player was going to make or miss his free throw just by looking at his fingertips as the ball is being released from the hand. And it turned out that the players were far and away much better at telling whether or not the guy was going to make the free throw. They were much better than even coaches who saw the same clip or ex-players that saw the same clip. There's something to being an active expert in your craft that somehow enables you to see and perceive things differently.
Along those lines, you get deep into our receptors, right? And I'm looking at my hands because, this is what you're saying, and this has real application because when you're holding a bat, you even describe that someone holding a bat, like holding a club in ancient days, right? Yeah. Becomes then our brain perceives that bat as part of our bodies.
Yeah.
So explain how, that's something we don't think about, how intricate our touch is.
Right. Yeah, there's more cortex devoted to the fingertips than there is to your entire trunk of your body. So there's a lot of sensitivity in those fingertips, and that relationship that your fingertips and your sense of touch plays in actually how you move and perform is really interesting. It's something that's not really well understood or appreciated, but it's one problem that's happening in modern robotics today. Not to get too far away from sports, but I think it's a good example. What we've seen in robotics is that robots have been very good at beating us in Jeopardy or chess and all these and driving cars, but actually getting a robot to move about has been a difficult problem. And one of the problems is that they don't have skin. They're not receiving things. They're not sensing. They don't have fingertips that can grip a club. Right. And so that relationship between what we sense and how we end up acting is really crucial.
That's fascinating. One last thing, because I know there also you describe that, speaking of the power of the skin sensors, there is something to building team chemistry, bonding through touch. Right?
Yeah, you love this.
your teammates. Well, this is something, look, everybody, Mark DeRosa, Ken Rosenthal, all the others, it's team chemistry. But there is something to actually touching, I don't know, high-fiving, right? Patting someone on the back, that's a little bigger than we think it is.
It could be, yeah. I mean, I think where the studies have shown is that deprivation of touch, not getting enough of that sensory perception in terms of touch, as it has detrimental effects on your ability to
like
perform.
a baby.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen there's certainly studies out of Romania from the Ceausescu days that babies who were deprived of touch ended up not really developing fully. But even in adulthood, the Phoenix Suns tried their own informal thing a few years ago where they kept a stat about how many high fives their players were getting and giving, and it seemed like the number of high fives correlated to their wins and their overall performance. So yeah, there could you should be happy about that. I know you're really into this.
No, look, hey,
into the touch thing,
whatever works. No, but I'm saying that we get so tied into chemistry and human relations because it is difficult to quantify. Right. But if something is explaining it, just even knowing like the receptors and how powerful that is, once you're aware of something, you can start to even delve into what that means.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the relationship between sensory and motor is much stronger than we would have thought. We usually think of them as being a two-way street, right? It's what we see and what we receive, and motor is how we move and sort of that output. But actually, their relationship is a lot more ingrained than that. So.
Did you ever have a conversation with Sean Casey? He's always touching you. He's touching. Oh, very touchy. Very touchy.
Too much is not a great thing either. But
he's the ultimate teammate. For Ken and everyone else out there. There you go. You can find it in here, the Performance Cortex.